For 6 years, Tom has been Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab's resident marketing and relationships manager. In this role, they have built partnerships and collaborations with artists in fields as diverse as literature, film, fine art, comics, drag, pro wrestling, and tabletop gaming. Tom's professional background includes theater, nightlife, and writing. So Tom, I want to know about your background.
I really want to make sure, like, when handed like an hour discussion, that it doesn't turn into a therapy session. And it's
That's
so funny
okay. We all need it.
when like I'm like, what is my background? And then it's like flashback, flashback, flashback. I grew up in a tiny town in Arizona with really like a lot of like you know lower middle class, poor quality education. My family did their best. God love them. Some of them did better than others. And then I was really, really a withdrawn, shy, creative kid who did not have any place in the world where I was for a really long time. And then as I got older and like, high school and stuff, of course, like probably most of the people listening and watching and stuff, the more exposed I got to various aspects of the creative arts, that was all I was interested in, much to my own, downfall in many ways because of where I was. But I left high school really convinced that I could give it a shot and do something really creative and brilliant. And it was kind of like a last resort for me. I really didn't know what else might be possible. So and I came from a background where education was not a priority. My family did not, for the most part, did not care if I went to college. My dad really actively discouraged me from going. He thought it was a waste of time. None of my immediate family had ever gone to college.
What
And
would they have had
so
you do? I mean, what was their interest for you?
that's so funny because that's a question I asked to myself all the time. Like, it was very clear that I didn't fit in anywhere, and I was a very obvious candidate to go somewhere and do something else because the available options were just not really, options for me. And my mom was very sympathetic, but she was a small town girl herself and very limited in awareness of what was even possible. So, and I gave community college a shot, and it was really terrible. And I was honestly dealing with a lot of my own, mental illness as a product of being free from all of that for the first time ever. And so I really gave it a go in Arizona, very hard for a couple of years, and worked in the local theater scene and the local art scene. And if I had stayed there, I think I left in 2002, right at the edge of when Phoenix was about to have its big downtown arts community boom and all of that. So it is nice to know a lot of the friends I have who are still there found a niche there. And if I had stayed, maybe something would have been possible for me. But instead, I ran off to New York City and started from the ground up. And, you know, uh, it was a really, really difficult time, but I found my people and I found projects to attach to. And I basically set about to see if it was possible to just make any of my dreams come true. I was, very green. And as much as I had educated myself as best I possibly could, every day in a city like that, you're running up against references and, cultures and things that you've just never heard of before. So that was a really rich way to spend my 20s. And then I thought that you had to choose one thing. I'm like, I'm going to New York City. I can't be like trying to do theater and acting and writing and painting and like there's too many people specializing in all of those things. You have to. I had to pick one and focus, and so I decided to work on writing. And I did do other little art bits here and there, but I really tried to work it as a writer. And I eventually was able to get a freelance career started, and that was how I was writing for a horror blog for the TV channel AMC. I talked my way into that door and I was writing for their blog. And that was actually where I encountered the lab for the first time because someone had shown me these perfumes that were inspired by H.P. Lovecraft and various horror things. And I ended up reaching out about interviewing Elizabeth, the perfumer, for the blog I was working for at the time. So that's kind of like, a linear timeline of.
I'm sure there were lots of twists and turns in there, right? Yeah, I mean, that's life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but as like a, I mean, the problem is, as a really, imaginative person, has always been like what to do with all of it, and like even our house has suffered from it. Like if you look around, we're interested in too many things, and
Yeah,
everything has to have its little place. And I've gotten much better at all of that as I get older, and organizing it and making it like actually amount to something.
yeah.
Um,
Do you know,
but
are you familiar with Jaron Lanier? He's like a writer from he's like, he was like early in the sort of I don't know, like VR scene. Thank you. My husband's filling me in because I'm brain dead today. And he writes about the shift from music to digital music, and he talks about how in analog music there's all these little loopy bits, like but in digital music it's burr, 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 burr. And I feel like what you're telling me reminds me of that you're like you're in the loopy bits, and you're trying to like insert some structures in that, but maybe
yeah.
I don't know. This isn't therapy session, so we won't go there.
No,
But
I
maybe
mean,
you don't need
and
that
boy has
structure.
boy has the pandemic made that challenging.
Oh yeah. I'm sure.
So
Yeah. So what was it that attracted you to Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab? It was their work with Lovecraft?
yeah, and like I mean, if you had asked me at the time, I wasn't interested in perfume, and I sure as hell didn't really know anything about it. I was just interested in everything that was beautiful and creative, and of course, what I know now is that most people have the same experience that I do, where a lot of what drew me in was their written description. The perfumes themselves are like a standard
Assume that
5
you're on
milliliter
deadline. I understand that
bottle
needs to be
size.
One
canceled.
second. Hey folks, can we please make sure to
Okay.
mute yourselves? Okay, I got it. Go ahead, Tom, carry on.
Okay. So like the bottles are small. There's not like a lot to look at on the label because it's really small. And this was before like a lot of like, whiz bang stuff on the internet, really. And early 2000s, they were small. But like the written descriptions were really what hooked people in and connected to storytelling. And one of the first things that I did, and I'm so embarrassed that I did this, except for I now know it's very common, is that after I had met them and done the interview, and I actually wrote like a whole pile of scent descriptions for imaginary perfumes based on Tennessee Williams' Suddenly Last Summer, because I was
Oh,
reading and
cool.
writing a lot about it at the time. And I sent them, I'm like, here's what I would do. Like I was excited and I wanted to like, like in the house style, and just like trying to like kind of give a beloved work of art like the same treatment that they give to all of their beloved works of art. And of course they thought that was very cute. And
Wait, do people do this a lot? I haven't done this. Am I missing out?
well, now that social media is a bigger deal, it
All
happens all the
right.
time where someone will propose a scent they should do, and then they will immediately tell us how it should be, and like,
I
and they'll take
see.
a bang at like writing the notes. And the irony of that is if we took their suggestion and followed their notes, we have like an immediate intellectual property dispute.
Right.
So it's like we have
That's
to
the
be really
flip side of
careful.
business people don't think about, right? Because then they're like, I did
Yeah,
that. You're like, no, yeah, totally.
yeah, like that sounds like a great perfume. You should make that. And if we make it, we have to get into some paperwork.
Right. Oh man, you never think about that, do you? Yeah.
Well, at the time, it was just, I mean, mostly people are, just sharing their fantasy. And I've learned from this job that so much of the world of perfume, but also just like in our little, even smaller world at BPAL land, is sharing fantasies with people. And sometimes that's fun and pleasurable. And sometimes it's like a little bit icky and you can't even explain why. And like, it's because it's personal. So, but I had sent them, and and I also grifted them and was like, hey, I'm doing this series of variety shows in New York City. Would you sponsor my show? And they very kindly said yes. And I had a little sponsorship thing going with them for a while. So that was like, and that was all before we really met in person. And then, by the time we met in person, we just kind of knew each other, and then we hit it off. And then I gradually, infected them with my madness. They had plenty of madness already, but like they didn't have my madness. So
So that was what, about 7 years ago that you joined?
I think that I wrote about them in 2009, I want to say.
Oh yeah, so that is
Long
a
time ago.
while. Yeah.
And it was a long, slow path because I took over the social media in 2014, I want to say. or 2015. It was around the time when we did the licensed Crimson Peak perfumes, because they were buried. Like the fall is a crazy time because you've got your Halloween and Yule and like all of these traditional releases that are kind of like the big time of year. But Crimson Peak was a fall movie, and it was a huge collection, and they had put so much labor into it. And it was very important that it do well, because buying licenses is expensive and you have to make sure that it's justified. And I remember talking to Beth at some point, and it was like the week before the movie was coming out. And I was like, well, if you give me your press release, I can share it around at least with people that I know in media. And she was like, there is no press release. Like, we are behind on everything. And that was kind of when it clicked in my head that they had, I mean, I knew just from knowing them at that point how much they had grown over the years. But it was the first thing as a friend, and I think as a professional, where I was like, they need like help. And so I jumped in, I made a press release like that hour, we got it rolling. And then from then on, I basically just took on bigger and bigger chunks of things, which up until that time had mainly been on Elizabeth, the perfumer. She's the founder. And so many of these things were on her neck, basically. And she's great at all of these aspects individually, but there's a finite amount of roles.
Yeah, it's only so much Elizabeth to go around, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And if we burn her out, we got nothing. So she's the actual goose that laid the golden egg. So that's been my gradual job, is to recognize if there's something that I can do. And that led to me doing a lot of writing for them, including, stuff for updates, because in the past it was, purely her work. And working side by side with her, it kind of came in very handy that I had already like started off with imitating what they were doing, So my biggest compliment is when I write something and people respond to it on social media as if she wrote it. And then I'm always just like, and it's not creepy because we're very good friends.
So there is this founder's syndrome that people, talk about, where the founder starts the thing and it's a lot of, I don't know what I know exactly what I'm talking about here. You put all this work, and then at some point you really need to open it up and let other voices come in. So how is that process for you guys transitioning to your voice also being, part of the brand?
To be honest, I guess as you would imagine, it really has its ups and downs, because this is a really large community that had been established long before I was around. And it's also a local thing to Los Angeles, which I wasn't at the time. And it's somebody's body of work. And everyone who worked at the time was like her family or people who had become family through work. And so it was intimidating. And also seeing the sheer amount of of fandom and how eager people were to kind of like jump in. I was like, I had to be very, very, very careful and build up trust as a friend and as like a collaborator very slowly, because and honestly, even coming into it, like a lot of my early ideas and the things that I wanted to try to help were met with a lot of resistance. And some of it's very practical, and then some of it is just based in, that's just not how we do it. That's not how it's been done before. And I'm just like, all right, but like, we're dying,
yeah, things have to evolve.
There's like a tension, and this is where it was very handy that we were friends, because I think it was important to preserve that friendship. And at the end of the day, I don't want her to be freaked out. I don't want her to feel like anyone is trying to like take control away from this or that. So I had to be really tender about it. And it means for me as a creative person and as like a professional, it means just walking away from ideas that I think are very good and suspect would work well, because like the timing's not good, or someone has just decided that's not a priority.
Yeah, it's funny, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that one isn't always aware of. So tell me a little bit about the process of learning about scent. So you said you came to it green, as did I, by the way. So
Yeah, I started when I grew up in a house where my mom was one of those moms who's very sensitive to smells and couldn't have anything around. I bought incense at the Renaissance Festival that I brought home, and
dude, I did that too. I've totally done that. No shame.
Burn it privately.
Ren Fair incense for the win.
Yeah, right. It was like that was really, I think, and then I had, of course, I had bought a few designer perfumes that I was, interested in when I was younger, because I don't know, that's just something you hear that you absorb that is accessible to you. And I was very bored and I had no internet. So, but then with BPAL, I actually, that was, these are, the price point is lower and there was a lot of interesting stuff and I was able to start buying stuff. And that honestly really was my entry point. And then I guess I had worked for a prominent restaurateur in New York who they were doing a large benefit for a Right to Die organization. And there was a gala event and they were having a perfumer design a perfume for people who attended the event. And I got to be there for the meetings and see all, like, test everything with them. And that was, I guess, maybe part of it too. Looking back, I had no idea this would ever be important ever again. But then once I started exploring with BPAL and collecting scents and learning what I liked, and of course, BPAL famously gives away, free samples whenever we happen to have them with every order. So it's very easy for someone to start to build up a kind of a literacy with certain notes or try to figure out what stuff smells like. And that's also the value of when we were able to do conventions, is we have everything there and someone can stand there for 4 hours and smell literally every perfume and, compare. So that really kind of was where it started for me. And because of that, I mean, I have learned so much because of the work that you all are doing and some of the people that I've followed because of the gathering this summer, because I'm constantly presented with my own blind spots. And I know this, everyone has them, but like I really have them. And I've been really trying to move past a lot of my own biases and associations because I don't know. And I just never had to. And now I do. So
yeah, one thing that I always really liked about Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab is that there's no hesitation to be political. Like, in fact, right now I'm looking at your website and there's all these perfumes that are overtly political, that are taking stances.
mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask you about that, because it's not a common stance in perfumery, although it's changing a little bit. How do you guys navigate politics with capitalism? Because the truth is we're all selling product, yeah, and do you get any pushback on that?
Well, it's definitely predates me because this is something that the founder was doing early on, and it was the luxury at the time of being like a really small figure, is that you can have it your way and the people who don't like it can do something else, like, and it's just not. And also, this is, the company started in the early 2000s, before social media was really a big deal, so like, there wasn't the kind of scrutiny that there is now. But like that was very much in this built in from the beginning, to an extent. But of course, in 2016, as things were developing there, I think the first thing that really kicked it off for us was doing, because we were always doing fundraisers or whatever, but like we did a Nasty Woman perfume when that whole moment happened.
I remember that, yeah.
This was a perfume that I know that Elizabeth had already created and had other intentions for. And in that moment when it happened, there was just this incredible need to address it immediately. Immediately, like you have less than 24 hours sometimes while people are still talking about the same thing. And so we set up a fundraiser. And the great thing about presenting a product online only is that we can create the artwork and have the description, and sometimes the perfume physically doesn't exist yet. Sometimes we shoot first and then work it out because we have a perfumer who can do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a
But
lot
like
of freedom.
and that scent took off and we raised a lot of money. I can't remember if is it Emily's List and is it Planned Parenthood? It's a few charities, I believe. And then from there, we just started, and then Trump won. So it was like, all right, buckle in, folks. And from that point onward, we couldn't do every like viral moment, but if there was a moment and we could get in there and the timing was right for us, we could just like pop out a perfume, raise a bunch of money, make people see, like basically everything above the cost of production was donated. And
Right.
so the sad truth is that most people won't actually donate unless they get something.
Yeah.
It's just
That's why like what are those crowdfunding platforms work so well, is because you get
yeah,
these little perks, even if it's just a sticker, people.
yeah, and I'm not going to knock it because I understand that there's something about a transaction that feels less like your money, that is invisible like dots at this point in the atmosphere, just gets like sucked away from you and goes somewhere else and you never see evidence of it. It's like there's something I think really symbolically important about, getting like some kind of marker to show that you donated. So we did a fake news perfume when that moment was happening, where if you bought the perfume and gave us your Twitter handle, then the lab's Twitter would tweet a fake news headline about you. And it's funny too, because like
It's
I'm like I
awesome.
said, relatively green, and so I'm like I think I proposed that. I was like, I'll do this, and Beth's like, are you sure? Do you know how many people might buy this? And I was like, I can do it. The spreadsheets, oh my god, like
So you had to write a line for every single person who bought a perfume?
every single person who bought the fake news perfume that included their Twitter handle, uh, I tweeted a funny fake news headline about them, and
Oh, wow.
it was a fun writing prompt that after a couple of weeks or months I was
You were like, I can't do this anymore.
so tapped. I was so tapped, but it was exciting though, because again, people, this was before I think we started to see more of the backlash against the woke brand, where brands engage in these kind of cultural moments as a way of being like, yeah, like we're like
Yeah. It's like
people,
marketing. Yeah,
we're
totally.
here. So especially on Twitter, and there was, thank you for asking, at every step of the way there was pushback, and that goes from 2016 all the way to today with what we put out. Like there's always a moment, and obviously the joke is always like, what, are you new? Like, you don't know that BPAL does this? But truth be told, sometimes someone is on our email list because they were at a convention and they didn't even buy anything and signed up on our mailing list because they thought we looked cool, like, uh, and also people don't open all of the emails. So like they can go a long time without actually being confronted with just how, terrible we are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but an early tactic that we started doing was basically like, if someone unsubscribed from our email list, there's an option to leave a comment explaining why. And people, as a kind of like a last dig, would often give some kind of lecture or leave some kind of message about how they don't want anyone to mix politics with perfume, or they think this is inappropriate for us to do this. And I just, I, I'm, I don't have to have the last word. I don't have to. But
Okay.
it really gets to me in those moments too, because it's the whole, as anyone who knows the history of perfume knows, like the way, like the history of sourcing ingredients from far off places, like wars are fought over these things. There's no perfume without this history. And so we would do a thing where, like, if somebody sent me like I got one of these responses, I would just post it to Twitter, and I would say something really disparaging about them in a cute way, but like basically I wanted our fans to see that there is a cost. There are people who are going to walk away from us today because we did this. Like, it's cute and it raises money for a good cause and it's like good for business, but there's, over time, as we go down this path, there's going to be a cost. There are people that we will lose forever for doing this, and what I love about it is that the response every single time is this wonderful, overwhelming, you know, support, and people who are like, I haven't bought a perfume in a while. I guess I'm doing it today, because our anger at what's going on is their anger. But we have a way to articulate it and make something out of it and present it with humor and heart, and just like, also just like the size of our accounts and stuff. Like, we stand for a lot of people. There are so many people out there who feel very alone, people in states where they don't have a single neighbor who thinks the way they do or who would accept them. And we have an opportunity, like, we, like punky little LA, vampire snobs, are on their side, and we get to like stick it. So it's been a personal a personal joy to me over the past years to be able to do that and to note how much love and relief there is for someone to see something like that in their timeline, and it might be the only thing they see like that all day. I don't know. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's look, I mean, speaking as someone who also, I have my beliefs. As a nonprofit, we can't be political. It's part of being a nonprofit. We're not allowed. So that's cool. But when I see, yeah, it's heartening to see brands that stand for things, look, it's easy to criticize, it's very easy to criticize, but it's harder to do things. And so I admire that. I've always admired that about you guys, and gals and people.
thank
Like, I
you.
feel like is something you've all always done well, and it clearly seems sincere. It's not like, it doesn't feel sinister or opportunistic. As
Um,
I'm speaking to you, I'm entranced with this crazy animation you put on Twitter today of the pink face like squishing in. I'm
oh, yeah.
losing
I'm like,
track a little bit. What is that?
what's the rudest face I can post in response to how this person comment made me feel, you know?
Yeah, here, I'll share the link for everyone if you want to hop on
It's like,
Twitter.
it's also really difficult to promote these products because they end up being flagged as political speech on certain platforms like
Oh,
Facebook.
interesting. Huh.
So normally companies, especially of our size, you have to pay to for your advertisements to
Yeah.
effectively go anywhere, and we can't, like, it just gets blocked. So
Yeah, I remember the good old days where you posted, people saw, and that was that. It wasn't so complicated, but
yeah,
monetization. So tell
right.
me, so you do a lot of communicating around smell in general, which can be quite tough. And luckily, your job allows you to talk about all these other things. But I'm curious, as someone who also does a lot of writing about smell, do you ever find it difficult to talk about perfume or to write about perfume?
Oh, I mean, especially now that I know that you know this, but not everyone does. We have, since the pandemic started, myself and my partner, who also works for the lab, Galen, we have been releasing videos where we smell the perfumes and react to them and describe them, basically, because no one can have events anymore. There used to be events where people could do this with the new releases, and we do that. And that's where, like you said, I mean, it becomes really difficult. I hate it when I catch myself using the same words over and over to describe things because I know it's not accurate, but you've got your performance anxiety and you've got your, you know, your limitations. And it's, this is why, I mean, watching some of the videos that you've posted at the Institute has really shown me where else there is to go. And there have been some really great resources to help me listen to people speak so articulately about fragrance from the maker side and from the, critical side. So it's tough. And writing wise, we have a house style, and Elizabeth has her way of expression, and I'm get to be fresh horses sometimes because there are times where I can tell that she's struggling to keep it fresh, and I can leap in and say, like, what if, what if, just like pry someone's hands off the keyboard and like get in there, and then we like make it better. So it definitely is. The more
Yeah.
group support you have, the more brains you have, the more you can appreciate and the better stuff you can make.
One thing I do want to talk to you about is your perspective on gender, and just for those who haven't caught it, Tom gave an amazing talk about gender euphoria at our experimental scent summit back in whenever that was. It feels like 10 years ago, May, June, who
I
knows?
know.
But I thought it would be nice to talk about it a little bit here also for people who didn't catch that. So tell me a little bit about how you think about gender in scent.
I mean, the kind of basic thrust of what we spoke about then was, it was really interesting for me to learn as I got into the world of fragrance, how people would use, how, for example, trans and gender nonconforming people could use, experiment with perfume the same way that they experiment with makeup and other products, as a way, like a low risk way of exploring what, other gender expressions might feel like. Like, there are a lot of people who, this becomes kind of the gateway. And I know that cisgender people can often have that same experience, and that there are, like, people who enjoy other gendered products. I try to avoid saying opposite gender wherever possible because it just doesn't track. But there's a, it's like a common way to explore, and it's like exploring a mentality and a fantasy. It's very accessible, and it's something that I think trans people and other people in the LGBTQ world have used very resourcefully. And I know that it is a great a form of assurance for people, especially perfume is invisible. Like you can smell it in your room, you can wear it and out and about, and unless somebody gets close, they might not be able to track it. So in the talk, I explained a little about how the push to be more inclusive about gender in fragrance has resulted for, over 20 years now, more of an interest in like gender-free perfumes, because it turns out that not everyone who wants to smell nice is looking to express a gender fantasy, and it's a way of kind of nodding toward a more inclusive picture overall. And it's like gender is what you make it, but at the same time, those fantasies of womanhood or fantasies of manhood that end up captured in scent are valuable. Like gendered fantasies are valuable to trans people. That's how part of how they find expression. It's part of how they feel that they fit in. So that's, I guess, the several minute version of what
That's,
we're.
I mean, it's amazing. I love it. Yeah. And by the way, just to share a comment in the chat, Kathy says that this is so true. BPAL has helped my own teen explore their gender as well. It feels safe to them in a fun way. Yeah. To me, it feels very optimistic the way you talk about it. It feels like here's perfumery fulfilling a role in society where people can imagine their better or more ideal or more preferred or whatever, or even disliked selves. I mean, it's like perfume can become this way of creating an optimistic vision of yourself. Would you
Yeah, and it's
agree?
very low commitment. So like the thing about optimism, especially among the depressed, is that it's very difficult. You need like it's the small things I think that really mean the most. Um, it's and a perfume is something that anyone can try. Once you give yourself the permission to reach out and start exploring, and some people feel that more easily than others. So there is something optimistic in it in a very small way. And meanwhile, the comfort from it, I think, can be quite large. So
Yeah. Yeah. Courtney shares Courtney shares that they explore gender with BPAL all the time. They have their go-to manly blends, and it really is like role play.
yeah, I mean that was
Yeah,
a
it's
big
true.
part of. I mean, even for myself, in terms of exploring gender and understanding what it was exactly that I was scratching at and trying to give off to other people, and it can be really confusing. Like uh, and also perfumes can be situational. So there's something where you wear it because you want to impress someone, and then you show up and you're like, wow, I wore the wrong perfume you know
Yeah, totally.
so
I've been there for sure. I this is a little bit of urban legend in perfumery, but there's this perfumer, and I won't name the person, but they wear civet in their beard when they're going to meetings because they want to give off this impression of kind of aggression, intensity, which I always think is a great example of how perfume can help convey, or possibly damage, your
oh
relationships and
yeah,
identities. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the thing too about like gender is a diverse enough thing. I mean, there are forms of like gender expression that are very clear but that are also not necessarily welcoming, like they're not necessarily for someone else, like
Right.
uh, and it's interesting to be able to provide a palette for that, so that it's like there was someone in one of the BPAL forum conversations recently that was asking for recommendations for scent that were, I think feminine, but like don't come any closer to me.
Right.
And the conversation was fascinating because a lot of the suggestions are truly in the eye of the beholder,
Right.
but everyone thinks they have the answer because they
Yeah.
have it for themselves.
For themselves, totally. What were people suggesting?
Well, I was suggesting some of the stuff from we have lines for role-playing game, like classic D&D style role-playing game characters, and those character classes are all kind of based in various like warrior party type, classes, like assassin and, fighter and so forth. Lots of like leather and musk and like nature scents that are like inviting to a point. And I suggested a couple of the ones from our recent collaboration with Sadie Doyle for the book. I've got it right here, Dead Blondes and Bad Mothers, there's one called Alien Siren that I had posted about a while back that I thought was great, like non-binary gender euphoria, because it's like this idea of femininity as like women as like an alien being that is,
I feel like an
ultimately,
alien being all the time.
and it has like a squid ink accord, and it just is like a kind of like a weirdly greasy smell, but like
Wow.
weirdly like spicy and inviting and very slick, and it's got a real cyberpunk quality to it in my opinion. So
That's funny. As you were saying that, Quinn wrote in the chat, I find that is extremely true of the Dead Blondes and Bad Mothers collection. It is tremendously threatening but uncompromisingly femme. So
yeah,
totally serendipitous comment at the same time as what you were saying. You guys are on like the same wavelength.
well, that's Quinn, so that's Quinn for you.
Yeah, Quinn knows. Carrie shares definitely wear leather scents when they want to feel more powerful. Courtney says they explore gender with BPAL all the time. Many quote manly blends, and it really is like role play. Um, Iago is the manly blend I refer to, all black leather dungeon. So how do you pick? Okay, so this kind of segues to my next question of how do you good people pick the topics? Like I'm looking here, I see Fraggle Rock, and I get it. Like I understand why you pick Fraggle Rock, but why do you pick Fraggle Rock? You know?
Well, some of it predates me, so I don't have all of the lore, but I do have nuggets of lore, and part of it has been opportunistic. Like there are instances where like a property comes to us, or is referred to us, and that's always an honor because like who doesn't love to be courted? But and of course it's business, so the happy feeling wears off eventually because there's a lot of extremely practical realities that come along with that. But it's really been in our perfumer Elizabeth, and she's just been from a very young age obsessed with literature and was very, I know, like most of us, comforted from a young age by particular myths and storytelling universes. And so that was like, it's her company. Like imagine what you would do if you had your own thing like that. You just go for what you personally, what makes you feel those great feelings again.
Yeah, okay, but a lot of people, go for, Rose. I mean,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I
true.
mean, it is not in the norm what you folks do,
It's
which is
true.
why it's so interesting,
So,
so
so she is the big weirdo that is like the head big weirdo, and then what's great is we can, and from there, like I have been working on licensing for them for most of the time that I'm here. It's challenging because there are so many wonderful things that people would love or that we would love to do. And of course, people's minds go to really big, far-flung places like Game of Thrones. You have to do Game of Thrones perfumes back when people still wanted that. But it was like, yes, but you have to understand that that is like the biggest, most in demand, probably most expensive license in the universe. And we're like, people, I have to always remember that people think we can do it because they see what we do as magic, and they look at the stuff that we've accomplished with like Labyrinth or Fraggle Rock and stuff, and they're like, BPAL can do it. If anyone can do it, it's BPAL. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I love that vote of confidence, but the truth is, like, we have, as a small business, we have real limitations on what we can bite off, and the amount of money that is expected for businesses to put up in order to play that game can be just like mind blowing. So
yeah.
and also what's hard about it is then you make it and people actually have to buy it so that you can make back your money, and that's not always something that pans out. So it's tough. Like if we had infinite money and space, we would pursue every license we want. We would make the sense whether people could afford them or not, and we would store them in our warehouse, and people could come into our warehouse and our events on big, like in a fantasy post-COVID world, and smell them all and love them. But like at the end of the day, as a business, there are just concerns that are inescapable for us.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That no, I get it. Which is interesting. You're having a lot of moments where you're saying something and someone in the chat is posting about the same thing. So there's some serendipity happening here. Is the BPAL magic?
great.
But Ava's asking, outside of COVID-19, is BPAL usually open to the public? Do you have a yeah?
That's the trick, is that we are not open to the public. We are not a retail storefront, and we weren't before COVID, and that was a real disappointment because we would have monthly get-togethers sometimes where people could come and like it's basically so locals wouldn't be penalized with the shipping cost, which is flat rate, and people could try things, and we would put out cookies and, you know, make a shindig out of it. And that was no longer possible. And I don't know when it could ever be again. And the sad thing is people would come to Los Angeles and they were like, I can't wait to go to BPAL. When are you open? And we would have to break so many hearts to, you know, because the odds that you happen to be there during one of our occasional events was small, or local appearances. So
Yeah.
it's, I used to fantasize about offering up like guided tours where if it was by appointment, I could be there and we could, you know, I could give someone a personal shopping experience and we could, you know, find a way to do it. But I actually don't even know if that will ever be possible now.
Hmm. Because
So,
of COVID or just because of the way the business is structured?
I mean, you know, it's a little of everything. To be honest, like we just like every square foot of our facility is devoted. It's basically claimed, and even for the little, you know, pop-ups that we used to do here and there, a lot of work had to be done to make the place like presentable or even safe for like for somebody to be there. So I just don't really know. I mean, that's my fantasy too. It would be great. It would be great to do. I fantasize about a storefront that Galen and I could sit in the storefront.
Ava's asking, how do people smell the perfumes in advance then? Do they order blind or samples or?
Yeah. What happens for the people who must smell them most urgently without committing to a full bottle? There are large decant circles, and a lot of those I think are organized throughout the bpal.org web forum, which is a huge fan universe where people review the scents. And
Is that made by fans of BPAL?
yes,
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, it is moderated and run by volunteers. I don't think I don't correct me if I'm wrong and you all are making bank, but it's just an army of lifers who have been super generous with their time and like have just been the cheerleaders of our business from the beginning. So, and yeah, like people organize decant circles where they can like, you know, send out little samples of something so you can decide if you want to invest in a full size bottle of something. Because otherwise, yes, people do buy a lot of blind bottles.
Carrie's wondering why you don't write your own, or is surprised that you don't write your own reviews on the scents. Is there a reason you don't?
I used to more before I worked full time. Full time.
Yeah.
And what's funny is there were times where we would get the new scents and I would be like a, you know, Friday evening or whatever, and I would get out my laptop and Galen's like, what are you doing? And like, I love writing scent reviews and it is just a fun pastime to try to, you know, it's like solving a word puzzle. And I have my share. I pop in every now and then, especially if we release a scent and I'm worried that people won't love it enough and I love it, I will definitely go in and shout about it and try to maybe guilt people into checking it out. Not that anyone necessarily like listens to me or cares what I think smells good, but like,
Well, I mean, you know, your opinion
but
is
it's like I
informed.
can like get in there and try. But I used to participate more, and now there's just so much to do that I just don't
Yeah,
get as often as I'd like.
yeah. What does Galen do for BPAL?
Galen does a lot of photography and filming and video editing, and you know, has in the past helped with our social media and stuff, and just kind of like swung in to help out, you know. And again, it kind of is like me, where at first he was helping at events and conventions and stuff, and then it's like, okay, well, you know the drill, like make yourself useful, because
Yeah.
like labor is our biggest challenge. We're a small company, and
Mm.
now more than ever, because unfortunately we're working without our production staff because of COVID, and everyone who's left is doing so much more than like
Yeah.
I can't even, like Galen and I recently actually have been helping out with production. Like we are pouring and labeling hundreds of bottles at a time. Just I actually it made me think, I'm like, am I in a cult? Because I it started off so innocently, and then I, you know, and now here I am like hunched over like a table for hours, like, you know, pouring these bottles, and I'm like,
Oh, the
oh
life of
wow.
a perfume person.
Yeah.
I've been there. Courtney, Ava says I'm a marketer too, and it reminds me of the beginning life cycle of the Red Bull. Very exciting. Courtney wants to know, Tom, do you have any dream projects? And if you could do anything, what would you do?
You mean through the lab or for like my own wild dreams?
Let's do both. Why not?
Oh,
I know. Start with the lab. Let's get to wild dreams after.
oh, I mean, so many of our wildest dreams are seem so close within reach at times. Like, so most people remember that we had the Last Unicorn, the book by Peter S. Beagle, and we had perfumes for that, and those have been discontinued for quite a while. And the dream, of course, is to get them back, like get them back. And then, but like the author has been involved in a lot of legal challenges over the years, and we really wanted to make sure that we were supporting in the right way, and that we didn't contribute to any of the problems going on there. So we have just been kind of like waiting for the high sign to be like, when is the time? So hopefully that we have to look forward to. That's one of my favorite collections also. And then in terms of like far flung crazy ideas, okay, this is gonna sound nuts. Are you ready to get
I
nuts?
love it. I love it. Let's get nuts.
Okay, oil barons, take note. So it's I want an ice cream truck basically, but I want it like outfitted inside with like all of the stuff for BPAL so that we can go all over to different locations in Los Angeles and do pop-ups just like on the street.
Can you please have an ice cream song written for you?
We need an we need music.
Yeah,
We need to like
please.
I have someone who can like trick out the van and make it goth and excellent, and we can have like red lights under it, and we don't even have to apply for all of the food licenses that a food truck needs. Like we could just
Yeah, because it's
show up.
perfume. There's no food. That's such a cool idea. And have like a
Yeah,
custom ice cream song written, like BPAL, do 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 do
yeah,
do do. Not the Entertainer by Scott Joplin, please. As you know, in our neighborhood, there's this one ice cream truck.
yeah.
That's amazing. So what would it take to make that happen other than COVID passing?
According to my mom, who deals in like loans, I think about $70,000.
Wow.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the dream just goes like.
Well, the 70,000 isn't a million, it's not that
That is
intense.
the nicest thing you can say about 70,000, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also true. Are there any of what are your favorite, because these talks always are like, they pass so quickly and it's always a bummer. And I always have things I want to ask that I
Oh
forget.
yes.
So
Oh no.
I'm
Okay.
gonna slam through a couple questions. So
Yeah.
any favorite perfumes right now? What are you loving right now?
Okay, so recently I should hawk BPAL shit, and I could do that, but I do that all the time anyway. I have been the first perfume I ever bought was Safari by Ralph Lauren, which is kind of embarrassing, but it was one of the first perfumes that I smelled a magazine insert of that didn't smell like aggressively masculine to me, and I was like, I think I can get on with this fantasy, and I like, like leopards and stuff, and I knew absolutely nothing about like white colonist like imagery related to like Africa, and I just was like a dumb Arizona kid, and I'm like, okay, I can handle this, and I wore Safari for a time. And recently for Christmas, Galen bought me a bottle of it so that I could re-explore it because I was very curious
That's very
what
sweet. Yeah.
to make of it now. And then on eBay, I bought a bottle of the women's fragrance because I had never smelled it, and I actually love both of them. So I'm just gonna pretend. I mean, my fantasy has nothing to do with whatever they're selling. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
And then from BPAL, I've been really obsessed recently with we did a gingerbread and leather perfume that
Mm,
I made a little like leather daddy gingerbread person, and we photographed them for the label, and like
that's
a
awesome.
gingerbread and leather and clove and tobacco scent that like just flipped all of my switches immediately. So that's my on my mood board right now.
What are you wearing today? Asks Kathy.
What am I wearing
I
today?
know it's
Oh,
which wrist, right?
I have an answer for that actually. I'm wearing the Nobody's Watching Wrestling perfume, which smells like black leather and strawberry lip gloss, which I associate in my brain with all showbiz related things because it was our partnership with the Brooklyn drag troupe that we have collaborated with a bunch called the Nobodies, and they have a program where they watch and critique professional wrestling.
Oh my God.
I know
Is that
that's like a
program
lot.
available online?
Yes,
So,
it's available online. They share profits with us. It smells, and because it's like leather and lip gloss, it totally smells like clubbing or like going to the mall with your girlfriends like in the 90s to me.
oh my God, that sounds fantastic. I'm
Like
super into
a mall madness fragrance.
that. This has been really, I feel like I've learned things. So someone wants to know, what's your favorite smell? Courtney wants to know, what's your favorite smell that isn't a perfume?
Orange blossom is a really important one to me because I grew up in Arizona and it's just extremely arid and like a lot of the scent, like I mean, it does have its desert scents that are, but like the driving through the orange groves is just like an overwhelming experience during certain times of year. So that's always been a great one for me. And then here in LA, there's, as you know, the honeysuckle that's planted everywhere, which you can just like walk through randomly like a kind of a invisible cloud of, and it just brings a tear to your eye.
So actually about your collaboration with Neil Gaiman, it's so how did that happen? What was the genesis of that?
Well, that does predate me, and I don't know how it started.
It's a cool collaboration. It's a
Yeah,
cool.
it goes back really far, and I don't even know for sure which one was first. Someone from BPAL land who's watching right now is going to know the answer off the top of their head, but I don't know if it was Good Omens or Stardust or what. But I think that somehow someone put a bug in Neil's ear, and he gave us, and we. I think that was maybe the charity that drew him in, because the condition of our perfume deals with him is that all of the perfumes, profits go to a charity. And so, and then he's just been very sweet about including us time and again as things, as opportunities arise. Like we had an opportunity to get, we had American Gods perfumes long before the TV series came on, but when the show was in development, we actually managed to kind of like get in there and expand it dramatically so that we would be able to have something to show that would be worthy of this new exciting series.
Quinn wants to know, what's your favorite piece of marketing you have done for the lab? The beating heart from Lupercala are something that their mind goes to.
Oh
Roasted
yeah, we did.
beer,
We
the
did
scent lockets.
an amazing inflatable, like weird beating heart. What I mean, my favorite piece of marketing. Oh God. First of all, this is me crawling like so far up my own ass in this, because it's just like, of course, all I sit and fantasize about is like, what can we get away with? To be honest, my favorite thing is probably the drag collaborations that we've been able to do. Working at DragCon was really great. The community has been wonderful, and we were able to work with particular queens. I'd love to do more of that. It's not very easy right now. We're so limited. Moving into video, and like the lab had no video presence before, and now we have a YouTube channel and are creating like little video spots, and that it's just like dragging us out of the 17th century into the 21st century. That is what I have done. I think that's my biggest accomplishment.
That's fantastic. And then I think this is a good question to end on. So what do you think makes up a modern perfume? Does it matter to you? Do you think it matters to culture and to perfume audiences? End it with a bang.
Yeah, a modern perfume. Like what? I think that everyone is trying to, I think that in modern art in general, there was this real desire to streamline, because truly original things are very difficult. And when they are made, they are often not appreciated or recognized. And the further along we got into modern art, I think that more the artists and art markets caught on to that. And if it's something is relatively simple, you can say whatever you want about it, and it's conceptual, and that is what makes it modern. But and then like the painting itself might not be especially like, I don't know, like really new. And that's just one art form. But like, so in perfume, what's really difficult about it is that, first of all, perfumers are working all over the world simultaneously and have just never stopped. So I feel like by the time you even survey what's going on in the world, you are behind, and someone's already doing something else. We've definitely done scents for the lab that struck me as being particularly, like we did when for Neil Gaiman's American Gods, we did the America's New Gods, which the book is old, okay, like it's not new. And so America's New Gods, even as mentioned in the book, are not new to us anymore. But America has been going through such a weird. This was, I think, was it in 2015 that we released these? America, there was a lot of new angst, and the scent I don't have the notes in front of me, but it was like a lot of like really frightening kind of man-made smells, like, you know, gas and vinyl and asphalt and rubber, and like it's and it was definitely a perfume specifically of this moment, and it's not something that everyone is going to think is pleasant. And of course, because of that, it's not a crowd pleaser and it hasn't sold very well. It's truly not for everyone, but it's one of the ones that I pull out in terms of like, this is what happens when you have a creative, brilliant person working at the height of their powers who can do whatever they want, you know? And because like Neil is approving the fragrances, but he also has been really generous in terms of letting us have our interpretation, and his notes
As a creative person, he understands the power of letting creative people do what they do, right? Like, yeah, that's a good manager is what that is. So
I guess that's my answer.
yeah, it's a good, I'd say that's a really good answer. Okay, Matthew, I don't think we can answer that question because we're out of time. But I will say if Chanel fades too fast on your wrist, please put on moisturizer and then try again because it'll help it stick a bit, I think. Tom, it was such a pleasure to have you. I knew it would be a pleasure to have you, and I was right.
Oh, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for this. This is a longer talk that I've had with anyone other than Galen in a really long time.